What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Wondour channel. I'm so excited because I get the pleasure of interviewing one of the managing partners of Wondour, Mr. Taylor Speegle. Today's topic is going to be a little bit about going into the metaverse. In our previous video, we had Mr. Dylan, our other managing partner of Wondour, and he talked about what is the metaverse, so people can actually understand what is the mecca of this thing everyone's talking about, this amazing buzzword that makes us feel intelligent and smart. Today, you're going to educate everybody on when do we enter the metaverse? When is ideal? How is it always evolving? And there's so much to talk about and unload on everyone today. I want to talk about, first off, to get into it, when does someone get into the metaverse and how do we know when the time is?
The metaverse is already here. That's one clear thing. And the short answer is now, right? With any sort of emerging technology and a technology that you're already seeing commercialization of and thousands and thousands of users all over the world start to use, now is the time to get in. Because if you wait another 5 years thinking, oh, it's going to catch up, I'll interact with it more in my daily life, it's already too late, and there's likely going to be disruptors, other companies, other individuals, marketing methodologies that you're going to get left behind of. So the short answer is really now. And one really good barometer of understanding when to enter a market and making sure that, some people say the metaverse is a fad. Well, look to well-established large corporations, right? Corporations tend to move like large boats, right? It's like turning a yacht. And with that, so they don't make changes necessarily in the most agile fashion. But you're seeing the likes of Nike, you're seeing Wendy's, you're seeing McDonald's enter the metaverse. You're seeing Budweiser enter the metaverse, right? Apparel companies, beverage companies, food companies. You wouldn't necessarily think, okay, well, why would they? And really, the reason they would is because it's already here and there's already millions of eyeballs that they can be in front of, right? If you look at Marketing 101, it's go where the eyes are, right? Brand awareness, right? Also, not only brand awareness, but actually transactions are already taking place within the metaverse today. And so if you just take one example of that is take Nike. So Nike recently launched Nike Land, and they chose to launch that in Roblox. And so Roblox is, if you don't have a small child, Roblox is a global sensation, has 230 million users in the game. And I think 30 million daily logins. And so with that, you have millions and millions of impressions that could be made, right? And opportunities to commercialize on those efforts. And you already have the eyeballs there, so go where they are. And that's where they decided to launch Nike Land. And I think since they launched, they've had over 7 million people visit their kind of location within that metaverse across 220 plus countries. So this is not necessarily just United States saturation. It is truly global phenomenon. And leaning on that, they're choosing to prioritize the direction that the metaverse is going to play. They're also creating NFTs around their products, right? And so you're seeing them prioritize that as a major revenue stream in their business. It's actually the fastest growing segment is I think they call it Nike Digital, is their fastest growing segment on a revenue basis across their entire organization.
That's amazing.
And so, when to enter is take lead from the big players in the game. Citibank is investing heavily in that. They actually have IP that they're developing related to it, and they estimate that the metaverse industry by the year 2030 is going to be worth over $13 trillion, right? And 2030 is less than a decade away, less than we've known each other, right? In that same amount of time, the industry that many people think might be a fad or just kind of brand new will be a $13 trillion industry. And it's going to impact far more. I mean, if you just look at that, apparel, commercial banking, restaurants, right? Those are just three segments, but sports, entertainment venues, anything that can be done on a day-to-day basis in your normal life, right? Any socialization, going up in a hot air balloon, right? Just think of all of these business segments that exist. They will have at least what we call a digital twin, which, in sitting down with Dylan, you may have spoken on, but the idea that, okay, you exist in the real world in this capacity and this is the nature of what you do, well, you're creating a digital twin in the metaverse. And that's what we're seeing permeate every industry already. And so when to enter the metaverse, there's likely somebody from within your same industry that is already there, that is already breaking ground, that is already kind of cornering off their segment of the industry. And by the time you realize what's going on, if you wait 5 years, you're now going to have to play a game of catch-up, right? Now it's still an opportunity. It's still young. It's still rapidly growing. But it's definitely something you want to engage with now.
It's funny because you have a beautiful young son. people used to always ask us, how do we know what's going to be next that's hot? If it's in fashion, you go to Asia, you go to Europe, and eventually those trends will start to come to America. Or if you're in America and, what's the next business to get involved with? You see juicing appear in California, New York, and then eventually comes into Middle America. And it's funny you mentioned this because we used to always tell people, if you want to know what's the next trend, you just ask an 8-year-old. What are they talking about at the playground? And they're talking about Roblox. It's so much fun, and it's funny because you just said with Nike, and then they develop, and it eventually starts coming to the point where maybe Friendster was for just a kid thing, and then eventually Friendster turned into MySpace, and it was still for kids, and then eventually Facebook was able to evolve it where they were actually able to get to the baby boomers, 65-year-olds and above, making these accounts, and be able to just see these trends happen before they can happen is what really positions yourself. And then what you're talking about is fascinating to me.
Yeah, and the rate, I think one thing not to understate is the rate of innovation, the rate of this change. It's accelerating, right? And so by some estimates, we will experience 20,000 years of technological evolution in the next 100. And that's almost an impossible statement to wrap your head around. And if you look at the last 100 years, you see it, right? And even from personal experience. So my great-grandma, right? I met her, so this is someone I spoke to. I met her when I was a little kid. She lived to be over 100 years old. In her lifetime, she came to the Oklahoma Territory on a covered wagon and then was able to see the birth of flight, human beings go to space, land on the moon, and hear the dial tone of AOL, right? All in her beautiful lifetime. And just think about how fast that pace is. Well, that pace, even if we kept up with that same pace, that pace is accelerating, right? And so if you look at the pace, that pace over the last 100 years, right, it seems remarkable that we've done it. And when we're sitting in the moment, as this rate of change happens, it's almost like we're semi-numb to it, right? We don't really understand the full gravity of it. And I think that is an incredibly important thing to humble yourself with is, and when it comes to when should I enter the metaverse, and we see that, okay, it's happening now. So let's say you realize it's happening now. The rate that the metaverse is going to impact how business is done, right? How we interact as just normal everyday people, how we transact, how we shop. The metaverse is going to have an incredibly important role in that, and that role will come faster than I think we've even been trained to just looking 10 years prior. And that's something that I think is important to wrap your head around, whether you are just an individual looking at your own career, right? How is it going to impact it? Or your startup, right? Trying to come up and conceptualize an idea. When you're developing that idea, how do you factor these types of innovations into your workflow, right? To make sure that you are ahead of the curve, right? You're not already behind when you're developing. And that's something we see quite a bit is somebody might have just launched a product 2 years ago that's already out of date, or we already see the risk factors and challenges coming about because of how fast the pace of industry is changing. And so that's something we try to instill in everything that we work on, and when entering into the metaverse is just understand these changes are going to happen, they're going to happen quickly, they're going to happen even quicker the further into the process that we get.
That's like, when you're talking the efficiency of the compound effect. When YouTube first came out, if something got 1 million views, it would be like, oh my gosh, this view got 1 million. Today, if BTS, the Korean boy group, if that doesn't accumulate within the first 24 hours, I'm not exactly sure, but 200 million views. I don't know if that's the actual number, but if it doesn't literally get 100 million, 200 million views in the first 24, 48 hours of their campaign, it is actually almost considered a failure, which I think really comes into the next part, because a lot of people watching this saying, well, that's BTS. Yeah. They are a global, huge, mega brand. Nike, billion-dollar corporation that everyone knows the swoosh. Jordan, Jumpman, all that stuff. How does the simple brand, the new company that wants to play, that understands this is the future, but how do they really position themselves without this mega 9-figure type of budget, type of ordeal?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's an incredibly important point, because that also plays into people's sense of timeline. Okay, well, big companies are doing it, which means it's going to trickle down to me eventually, maybe 10 years from now. But to one of my examples from earlier, if you have a shop that does, tours of the Grand Canyon, right? Just to kind of take this example, that is something that could have a very real, amazing, experiential take in the metaverse, right? So you can take that real world brick and mortar shop and position yourselves in a way where at least you understand that maybe you could build a sales experience that takes footage from right outside your back door, from where you already are, giving these tours. You can try to take some of that intellectual property, take some of that footage, and start developing that so that you're positioned in this 3D landscape.
You know, what we did with VRLU, I really saw what you're talking about, where people were able to, within our travel section, people would text us, people would Instagram us, and they would DM us and be like, wow, how cool, we were able to see a Cadillac Ranch, and that's something, one, I didn't even know existed, but two, I was finally able to see that. And I think a lot of people on the marketing side, and also the CEOs and all the people that want to involve themselves in the metaverse on the large scale, is they're like, okay, with our stadium, we could never fit more than, if it's the Dallas Cowboys, 60, 70,000 people, which is a ridiculous amount of people. The metaverse, though, gives us the ability where we can have, well, 1 million people now, 2 million people, depending on how many people want to see this football game. And I think with what you guys are doing and be able to position businesses and position companies and position individuals to finally be able to see that Justin Bieber concert or the Boyz II Men concert, that the reality is they were never going to go to their small city. Now they can have that front row seating thanks to the technology that you guys are building with Wondour.
Absolutely, and the video footage you capture, like with VRLU, this thing right behind us, right? You know, capturing 3D, 360 video content. Even if you just start there, right? Because people often go out for videography and, you know, basic two-dimensional videography, and tying back to what is the metaverse and, right, what is virtual reality. You know, virtual reality and the metaverse are, I think, virtual reality is the metaverse at its best, right? You're breaking what is a two-dimensional kind of environment that we deal with on the world of screens, and reintroducing 3 dimensions, right? Reintroducing the humanity of the situation. And so in everything that you do, let's say on your website, right? Let's just take videography, for example. Even just thinking about taking that same footage and capturing it in a 3-dimensional fashion is a fantastic starting point, even for the most basic businesses, because that you can even display that on your website, right? So people can experience and scroll around in a pseudo, you know, virtual reality environment, and that same asset can then be used when inevitably Expedia launches, you know, an OTA where you can share your same experience like you do today, but in the metaverse, right? And part of that content is going to be, okay, well, if you want, upload a 3-dimensional or 3D 360 video of your experience. And if you're the first one to do that, right, your experience now on Expedia or TripAdvisor, whatever it may be, now stands out. And so even those small steps that have a much, much smaller price tag, you're not having to build an entire environment, but just thinking about how you can reshape the way you're marketing, reshape the way that you're creating content, will position you in a way where you don't have this seismic leap you have to take in 2-3 years. In fact, you can play it to be your strategic advantage against your competitors with making a few tweaks and just understanding what's coming. I think that's really where, you know, for the average business or the average, you know, entrepreneur, that's where it can come into play. Just small little decisions where you don't get left behind and you can actually use it as your advantage.
What do you recommend for smaller businesses that they do know the vision and see the vision of the metaverse, but they're not sure, how do I play into this sandbox? How do I actually get myself involved into the metaverse?
Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's kind of multifaceted, right? So one thing, expose yourself to what it is, right? What is this new medium of expression? And so a great way to start would maybe buying a virtual reality headset, right? I think what's wonderful, and I think part of what's causing the adoption of virtual reality and in turn, you know, metaverse growth, is the availability of the hardware. So instead of, you know, it's not $1,000 to get a virtual reality headset, you can buy an Oculus headset now, Meta Quest 2, for I think retails $300. And so that barrier to entry to understand what those experiences are like are a fantastic starting point. So then you can also see, what are other brands doing? What already exists there that I could adopt? Because each industry, each segment, each stage of a company is very, very different. And so I think starting with a baseline degree of familiarity is really the place to start. And then, you know, your expertise, right, that you already have in-house is not inherently knowledgeable of what the metaverse is, right? This is new for us, right? We're in the world of technology, and we're learning and helping to shape it every single day of what we do. And so then it's reaching out to people who are already doing it, right? Reaching out to you know, firms like us, reaching out to, you know, me personally, the firm Wondour, and it's amazing what one conversation can change about your entire worldview, your entire perspective, right? So try to educate yourself to have a degree of familiarity, and then reach out to people who are already doing it. And it can be a light bulb moment that happens, you know, in a 15-minute conversation. You can curate, you know, if you were to call me, right, I can understand your business, understand your needs, where you are in the world, and then give you a specific recommendation about what I'm seeing happen in real time.
You know, and that's interesting, because to me, that's one of your skill sets too, is taking a business that, whether it's small or large, is kind of irrelevant, but this is how they're used to making money, and being able to, I guess, be open-minded to the idea of pivoting, you know, and changing we've done this with our current base. How do we pivot it into basically 6, 7, 8 times our current income or whatever it may be?
Yeah, and that's the beauty of digital in general, right? Is if you're a brick and mortar store, for example, right? It's people coming by and looking at your store, maybe coming in, and that's your traditional transaction method. Look at Nike's situation, right? They have a Nike store, and they have thousands of retail locations. They have their online store. They go into Roblox and build their experience, right? And now that is a primary revenue stream for them that is going to expand. And so they're not changing necessarily what they're selling. They're doing a pivot, right? It's not having to reinvent entirely who you are or what you do. It's understanding your brand, understanding why people already trust your brand and trust what you do and want to purchase from you, and understanding how you can run a parallel track within a more virtual reality environment. Because again, VR and the Metaverse is simply taking what I think is the day-to-day experience of who we are and how we operate, how we socialize, and bringing that into a digital space. But it's still very familiar, right? I can sit down with you here in person in a virtual reality environment, and I can see your head move, and I can see, eventually we're going to have more and more detail around. I can see eye tracking and see your eyes move, but I can still sit down with you, right? It's a very human experience. So it's not, I'd say, as just a baseline to anybody out there, it's not a completely foreign world that you cannot relate to. It's very similar to the real world, and it's just understanding how to navigate these current stages and position yourself for the future.
Taylor, with games like Fortnite, where kids, and I shouldn't even say kids, people in general, they want to have their skins, they want to have their shirts, they want to have all these things. Can you explain to people how, yes, digitally, you can get your Nike shirt. Mm-hmm. Yes, digitally, you'll have your Nike shoes. So when we have our Wondour meetings in the Metaverse, I'm going to come in with my Jordans and all that, and you'll be able to visually see that. But Nike and all large companies, their intention still is to sell physical clothes, physical shoes, and that's only going to propel that.
So that's exactly their intent, right? It's to expand their offerings, and they still have, Nike is a brand, right? They happen to be focused on apparel, right? They have the swoosh, but they're selling the swoosh. And so how do you bring all of that brand equity that you've built in the real world, bring it to the digital world? And again, the more impressions that you have, the more brand awareness that you have, which has always been something like Nike's, that's been their bread and butter, right? Is brand awareness, is bring that into the digital world, still allow digital merchandise that you can purchase, you can wear, you can see, you'll have billboards and all of those different expressions. Then as soon as you're out of the Metaverse, you've had all of that exposure to that brand still, right? And so it's not that when somebody enters in a virtual reality headset, there's now a detachment from the Nike shoes you're wearing. No, if anything, you now are more decked out in Nike apparel, so that when you leave the environment, that is more embedded into your association with who you are and the brand and how that brand relates to the individual. So it goes very much two ways, right? You still want to retain that brand equity and awareness and those merchandise in the digital environment, but what that does is it translates as soon as you're out of that digital environment, that brand is still top of mind, and that will still be true as we move forward between the real world and the digital world that we're creating.
So AKA keep on taking our money.
Yes, they will still do what they're very good at and keep taking our money.
I love it. How do people get a hold of you? I know a lot of people, they have questions, they have comments, they have ideas they want to explore, but they don't know where to start. If there's anyone that's going to do that, I know it's you guys to be able to really share that education with people. How do people get hold of us?
So just starting with wondour.com, right? WONDOUR. That's a great place. Or any of the social channels, right? Our YouTube videos, Instagram, wherever we may be. Direct message us, reach out. And what's incredible about our team, myself included, we love to talk about this, and we love to share ideas and openly, right? There's not this giant paywall or barrier to entry. We'll share ideas freely, right? Because that allows us to understand, who you are. Do you fit within, partnering with somebody like Wondour? And we love being able to give even just little bits of information to see the clarity on people's faces. So if you're interested in this, you're concerned about this, you want to understand how it impacts your business, just reach out wherever you can find us, and somebody on our team will respond. We're happy to jump on a call or a quick message chat and figure out how we can help you.
So if anyone has any questions for us, our community number is 702-602-8802. Any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, thoughts, quandaries of any type of any sort regarding any of our technology, Metaverse, VR, AR, augmented reality, whatever it may be, again, just text us that question to 702-602-8802. Can't wait to see you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see everybody next time.